Ready?
Yeah, you're good now.
All right. I said I wasn't going to do a hot tub race recap. That's Lionel's thing, and I'm not poaching content, but I get it now. I get why he does it. This is nice. Ironman Arizona. Ironman debut. I mean, couldn't have asked probably for a better day overall. I talked a little bit about just the in-between of 70.3 Worlds going into Ironman Arizona. So we did kind of a week basically of Ironman training in between, just to switch everything over to, more Ironman energy systems and try and dial in the nutrition and everything. And it went really honestly pretty well, and race week was pretty chill. Dodged some sicknesses in the family, which is always good, but it was really kind of odd being able to sleep in my own bed and race from home. Race morning, like check in, everything went smoothly, and the water was actually a lot colder than I thought it was going to be. It was colder than Sand Hollow.
He was just second at the 70.3 World Championships in St. George. First-time Ironman, Ben Kanute.
It was good. We warmed up a bit, started in the dark again, and we got going pretty well. It was a pretty short swim to the first turn buoy, so we started probably a little quick, but then again, I have no experience with Ironman starts. And Andrew, he raced against Joe Skipper in Ironman Wales and had a strong swim bike there, so he took the lead in the swim, and I just kind of followed, not really knowing exactly how to pace an Ironman swim, and just kind of, letting myself relax there. And I felt like we were swimming a pretty good clip. I felt like he was kind of zigzagging a little bit more, because it wasn't the easiest swim course. It wasn't a straight line. It was gradually turning, so what you were sighting off of was a little bit different than like where you were kind of going, like the landmarks. You were almost swimming diagonal in the lake, which is a little bit disorienting, I guess. But overall, swim was non-eventful. He gapped me a little bit, just, probably the little bit of swimming around, and maybe I just didn't have a good rhythm there or something, and just kind of swam my own pace, which is what kind of happened at 70.3 Worlds. So I was fine with it, and it's a long day. Got out of the water. I think the gap to the guys behind was only like 3 minutes-ish, and I didn't know exactly who that was, and honestly I haven't checked all of the splits necessarily, but I had 10-15 seconds to Andrew ahead of me. I did slip coming out of the water. It was just a slick surface and just kind of hit the deck, but otherwise things were relatively smooth. I think I had two very Ironman transitions this weekend where I fumbled around. I chose to go gloves and arm warmers just because St. George, I remember being pretty darn cold for a while, and the weather was pretty similar, with the water actually being a bit colder here. So with the less intensity and lower intensity, I didn't want to get cold too quickly, but it ended up not being an issue. The sun was already up. It was a cloudless day, and that warmed things up actually decently quickly, along with the fact that I had to work a little bit harder to close the gap to Andrew up front, and held probably above what I should have been holding at the time. For the overall race, I was probably a little over 300 watts, feeling good and knowing he was coming back. But then when I got to him, I was able to chill quite a bit, but not too soon after that. I'd taken the lead, and I hear a bark out of nowhere, and I just was kind of like, oh, you know, it's a little early to hear, you know, that bark coming up from behind. And it was Joe Skipper and Christian Hogenhag was with him. So they rode up, and Joe mentioned, you know, let's rotate around like 5-minute turns and just share the work, and we'll rotate out. And it was a pretty windy day, actually. The forecast, I think, when I was looking in the morning, maybe it was like 8 miles an hour at the start, and maybe built up to like 13, but it definitely felt pretty strong. So I was happy with that. I was fine to share it and key off of other people, and I had kind of a goal wattage that I wanted to hold, but wasn't tied to it, and would have been happy to kind of pace off of everybody else. But at the turnaround, which it's kind of a gradual uphill into the wind on the way out, then you flip it and you scream downhill, and that's usually, you know, where I was kind of planning on backing off a little bit, because a little bit more effort there doesn't get you too much more speed. And I had just pulled off after the turn, doing my turn, and Andrew went through, then it was Joe went around me to follow him, and I was trying to drop to the back so that we could all kind of file through easy enough, and waved Christian through, and he took off like a rocket. And I thought that was, you know, a little early, but Joe followed him, and so then I tried to follow Joe, and I think Andrew got dropped, and it looked the same gap between Christian and Joe for a while as Joe and I was pushing, you know, well over 300 watts early on. That was at like mile 20. That first lap, you know, I just kind of settled in, regrouped a little bit. I could tell my back was getting a bit sore early on, just from the wind and from pushing kind of hard. That second lap got really crazy. That next half lap to the halfway point, a lot of age groupers on course, and we actually saw kind of a gnarly crash that had happened. I just kept telling myself, like, protect my back, nutrition, and just stay steady, and was, you know, average power in the mid 280s and normalized power a little over 290. So I knew I was riding strong. It's just Christian and Joe kept putting time on, and I could tell Sam was like slowly making up some time. And so I actually enjoyed the bike a lot more than I thought I would. That's kind of a bit of a monotonous course. It's been known to be kind of crowded, but I feel like I paced it very well, had a little bit of extra something to push to the top of the hill, and my legs felt good. So I felt like all of that stuff was just a lot of positives to take into the marathon. And sat down for the first time in a long time in transition to put on my socks and shoes and gather up my stuff to head out for what I was telling myself for just another run. Everybody was telling me make it as easy as possible early on, and while it was easy and kind of cruisy at like, you know, mid 6 minute pace, like 6:05 or so, my back was a bit sore, so I was just trying to, you know, get my hips into position for running and just stay smooth and let them open up. And yeah, I just knew it was going to be a long day running. I could tell I was running about the same pace as Joe and Christian at the beginning, and I was getting word that Matt Hansen was 10 minutes back, but he was making up time very quickly. I was trying to just ignore all of that noise, and I knew Joe Skipper had his Kona slot, and then it was a free-for-all for the rest. So it became a bit of just focusing on myself, taking in my nutrition, and trying to keep as cruisy of a pace as possible, because I knew it would get harder, and made it through one lap. Christian was starting to lose a little bit of time. Joe was kind of off on his own a little bit. He was pulling away, and Matt Hansen was chipping away at me quite a bit. He had gotten the lead the gap to me under 5 minutes. I just kept telling myself, people were like, you got to dig now, and I just knew I had to run my pace. By the turnaround, like mile 15-ish or so, that's when it definitely started to tickle a little bit, definitely started to hurt. But again, I was just trying to run steady. My pace was right where I wanted it. It was maybe fading just a bit, but it wasn't, you know, too much overall. We're talking like average of like a second or two minutes per mile over the entire run. So I knew I was in that 240 to 245 range, and the crowds helped a bit too, and I got to see Courtney and Briella out there, which was awesome. And
oh, Ben's doing amazing, just absolutely incredible, looking really strong. We just saw him on, I think it was mile 17, and he's looking strong, so we'll see. Third place. Now, Matt Hansen's charging up though, so we'll see.
Joe actually, he got a bit emotional after the race, which of course winning and everything, but he kind of mentioned how, you know, after races like this, you know, emotions just kind of flow a bit more, and I totally got that because I almost got emotional just seeing Courtney and Briella there and had to collect myself, and I was just very much in my own zone today, running my own race, and ran by myself all the way until mile 20, where Matt Hansen caught me, and then we soon after caught Christian, and I kind of skipped over the 16 to 19 mile markers and stuff, but that was a bit of a battle, knowing that Christian was fading, but how much am I running fast enough to catch him in 8-9 miles? And then I just kept telling myself, run my pace, and if he comes back, he comes back, and just wait. And by the time I hit the 20 mile marker, then I could kind of count down miles of like, okay, that's 10K, then we have 5. And actually what I did notice about the course on the first lap is mile marker 19 and 24 were right next to each other, and I just made that a 5-mile loop in my head. That was actually kind of interesting on the back half of the course. So yeah, I got a little excited to run with Matt Hansen and hung with him for like a couple 100 meters, but could feel my hamstring starting to twitch, and I'm like, that's, I did my job with running with him to try and like gap myself from Christian, and then it was survival mode kind of from there on in. Miles 22 and 23 were, pretty solid overall, but then 24, 25, and 26 actually just really hurt. I felt like I was running super slow. I was still like 6:30 pace, but yeah, it was just super painful. But overall, got across the line. Was super happy to break sub 8, break 8 hours, which I knew I was capable of, but on a day like that with the wind on the bike, that makes it pretty tough. And then get my Kona slot, get a podium. And I mean, Matt Hansen and Joe Skipper are phenomenal Ironman athletes. Like, it was a lot of fun to race them, and shows me like the level that I need to get to be competitive at this distance. And it was a competitive field overall. Like Christian, he, I guess, faded at the end, but like he went for it, and he's the reason why, there was the split in the field, because he really pushed the pace. So a lot of good athletes, a lot of good racing, and just kind of cool to, see some messages, see some stuff of like, I think that was in the top 5 or so, like debuts for Ironman, which is pretty cool. Like, it's a quick course, but it was a tough day, and yeah, I take a lot of pride in that. That's pretty awesome. And honestly, again, it's just being able to race for the entire time and be in these battles and trying to hold off somebody, trying to catch someone, and I enjoyed it a lot. And I've also never been in as much pain as the end of an Ironman, where just like everything ached. That's something that was new. It was a little bit of a different pain than the halves and below. So overall, great experience. I think this is probably going to be one of the longer race recaps too, with it being an Ironman, and there's so much to talk about. So yeah, I mean, try and send some questions my way too if there's details you want to know about, because I learned a lot on the day. Had a great time, and yeah, I guess we're going to Kona next year.
On the run, very impressive, because you don't know what you're letting yourself in for when you haven't done one before, so that bodes really well.
I know, I was just pushing. I hit like pretty much my goal. I didn't want to go too much harder than that at all, and I was like, I can't do anything else. If I try and go with these guys, I'm going to blow up.
That was a really hard course, because you didn't get any benefit if you were with people because of the way the wind was coming from, I don't think.
Here, doing the Ironman, 70.3 has always been...
Thanks.
Woo, 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 woo.